In the winter of 1821, in a remote village on the edge of the Scottish Highlands, an event unfolded that would shatter everything the locals believed about human nature and the hidden depths of the mind. A boy appeared out of nowhere, speaking a language no scholar, traveler, or linguist had ever heard. This wasn't just an obscure dialect or some long-forgotten tongue. The patterns and structure of his speech defied the very foundations of human language itself. His story is preserved in the private journals of Dr. Haish Mloud, the village physician, and in the sworn testimonies of 17 witnesses. It is the story of a child who may have carried secrets from a place that should not exist, to grasp the true weight of what happened in that bitter winter. We must first step into the Scotland of that era. The nation was still reeling from the Highland clearances, when thousands of families were driven from their ancestral lands to make way for sheep farming. The village of Inverare, this tale takes root, was one of many remote communities fighting to survive in an increasingly unforgiving world. With barely 300 residents, mostly farmers and fishermen, the village was cut off from the nearest towns by days of dangerous travel through frozen mountain passes. It was a place where Presbyterian faith mixed with superstition, where echoes of Celtic myths still haunted the people's dreams, and where any stranger's arrival was enough to draw the whole community's attention. The winter of 1821 was especially brutal. Snow blocked the roads for weeks, leaving Inverare completely isolated. And it was in this deep isolation, on the morning of February 14th, that something extraordinary occurred. Margaret McTavish, the village school teacher, was the first to see the boy. In her diary, only discovered decades later, in 1892, during the demolition of her cottage, she described opening the schoolhouse door to find a child sitting on the steps. He was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, dressed in strange clothing of thin, almost silky fabric, cut in a style that belonged to neither their time nor place. But what struck her most were his eyes, unusually bright, reflecting light in a way human eyes should not. Margaret tried speaking to him in English, then Scottish Gaelic, and even the little French she knew. The boy replied, but in sounds she described as musical and fluid, like water rushing over stones, yet clearly intentional and intelligent as he spoke. Margaret felt something far more unsettling than simple incomprehension. It wasn't just that I couldn't understand him, she wrote. It was as if the language itself was wrong. His words followed rules no human throat should be able to produce, yet the structure was undeniably logical. Margaret brought him inside, offering warmth and food. The boy was calm, even grateful, and began pointing to objects in the room, apparently trying to teach her the words for them. That's when she made her first disturbing discovery. His language seemed to have a mathematical structure. When he pointed to one book, he said dialect. 2 books became Thailandverth. 3 books, Thailandverth Kyle. But 4 books, suddenly, the word changed entirely. Mundara. 5 books, still Mundara. The boy appeared to be counting in a base 4 systems, suggesting a mind that processed reality in a completely different way. By afternoon, half the village had gathered at the schoolhouse. Among them was Dr. Haish Mloud, who approached with skepticism but left deeply shaken. In his medical notes, he wrote of the boy's unusual physiology, vocal cords with extra muscle fibers and cartilage, allowing sound production far beyond human range, a slightly larger skull with strange bone structures where language processing occurs, eyes that dilated and contracted in patterns unrelated to light, and, most disturbingly, a heartbeat in a 4-beat rhythm, mathematically sequenced. As word spread, scholars began to arrive. One was Professor Alistair Dunore, a linguist from the University of Glasgow. He spent 3 weeks documenting the boy's speech and concluded it surpassed every known human language, able to express concepts with no equivalent in any tongue. His findings, later published in a restricted paper, hinted that the boy's mind could process multiple dimensions of reality at once. Even more unsettling, Dunore found that the language was evolving, adapting itself, week by week, as if the boy were trying to bridge the gap between his world and ours. But the effort seemed to cause him distress. He became agitated, especially at night. Villagers overheard him speaking urgently to the stars, as if pleading with something far away. Then came the drawings, given paper and charcoal by Mary Sinclair, the village seamstress. The boy began to create images that left everyone who saw them deeply uneasy. The boy's drawings were unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. They weren't pictures in the traditional sense, but intricate diagrams, mathematical formulas, astronomical charts, and strange symbols belonging to no known writing system. And yet, there was an undeniable logic in them, a precision that hinted at profound knowledge. Dr. Haish Mloud preserved several of these sketches in his medical journal, describing them as windows into a mind guided by principles we cannot comprehend. One drawing in particular captivated every observer. A map, but not of any place on Earth. It was a web of geometric shapes connected by lines, as if depicting a vast network or communication grid. The boy would repeatedly point to certain symbols on the map, speaking urgently in his language. Professor Dunore tried to decode the markings, but eventually concluded they represented concepts with no human equivalent. It's as if he's trying to show us the location of something or someone using coordinates that exist outside our understanding of space and time, he wrote. The mystery deepened when the boy began to display what the villagers could only describe as prophetic abilities. On March 15, 1821, he became agitated, pointing to the sky and speaking with growing urgency. 2 days later, an unexpected and violent snowstorm struck, lasting exactly 3 days, just as the boy seemed to predict. This was not an isolated case. Through March and April, he would grow restless, gesture toward certain points in the sky, or distant hills, and speak urgently in his strange tongue. And each time without fail something significant would occur. A storm, a landslide, or even the sudden arrival of strangers to the village. Dr. Mloud documented these incidents meticulously, and the more he observed, the more he became convinced. The child possessed knowledge that reached beyond human limits. The situation escalated at the end of April when a delegation from the British Crown arrived in Inverare, led by Colonel James Worthington, a military intelligence officer investigating unusual activity in the Highlands. He was accompanied by Dr. Erasmus, a government physician specializing in mental anomalies, and Professor Cornelius Ashworth, an expert in ancient languages and lost civilizations. Their arrival marked the beginning of the end, not just of the boy's time in Inverare, but of a cover-up that would last for more than 2 centuries. Worthington's first act was to isolate the boy. No villager could approach him without authorization. Interrogations and examinations began immediately. Transcripts of these sessions discovered in 1987 and declassified. British archives revealed the officials' deep unease. On April 28, Dr. Erasmus wrote, "The subject demonstrates cognitive abilities far beyond known human capacity. His language encodes information, suggesting access to knowledge outside contemporary science." Professor Ashworth was even more direct. "This is impossible. He is communicating concepts no human mind should hold." Colonel Worthington's own observation was perhaps the most chilling. The boy's drawings contained accurate, detailed layouts of British military installations, state secrets he could not possibly know, for 2 weeks. The government officials examined him behind closed doors. Villagers were kept away, but many reported hearing strange noises at night, his voice, but distorted, as if coming from deep underwater or from a great distance. Margaret McTavish, in her diary, wrote, "They are doing something to him. I can see it in his eyes when they let him walk outside. That light in him, it's fading, as if they are draining his soul." On May 12, 1821, the boy vanished. The official record claimed he had been transferred to an appropriate medical facility, but those who witnessed his departure told a different story. Before dawn, blacksmith Thomas McBride saw a covered carriage leaving the village. Inside, he glimpsed the boy surrounded by shifting shadows that moved like living things, yet not quite human. The child was speaking in his strange tongue, but his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the air itself carried his words. Others swore the carriage moved without sound, and that strange lights followed it into the mountains. That was the last time anyone in Inverare saw the boy who spoke the impossible language. But his story did not end there. In the months that followed, unsettling reports began to emerge from across the British Empire. The first came in August 1821, when Dr. William Hartwell, chief physician at the Royal Hospital of Edinburgh, wrote a confidential letter to the War Ministry. A man, admitted after suffering a seizure during a university experiment, began speaking in an unidentifiable language. Hartwell recognized the speech patterns from the classified Inverare case. Even more disturbing, when the man recovered, he remembered nothing and had no knowledge of foreign languages. Between 1821 and 1830, at least 40 similar cases appeared in hospitals, universities, and military facilities. Always the same pattern: someone with no special linguistic skill suddenly speaking the impossible language during altered states, high fever, seizures, or scientific experiments involving electricity or magnetism. And in some cases, these individuals seemed to be conveying information, mathematical solutions, decades ahead of their time, designs for machines not yet invented. In 1825, the mystery reached the highest levels of power. The Prince Regent, later King George IV, witnessed one such incident at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. According to a document uncovered in 1963, the astronomer royal, Dr. Nathaniel Maskelyne, was demonstrating a new telescope when something extraordinary occurred during the observation of a rare planetary conjunction at the Royal Observatory. A young assistant named Peter Thornberry, just 19 years old, suddenly fell into a trance. But this time, the phenomenon took a new and more unsettling turn. Thornberry wasn't merely speaking the impossible language. He appeared to be responding to someone, as though carrying on a two-way conversation with an unseen presence. The Prince Regent, at first fascinated, grew visibly uneasy when Thornberry began pointing toward specific constellations, pronouncing sequences of sounds that followed intricate mathematical rhythms. It was as if the boy were receiving astronomical instructions from a source none of us could perceive, Dr. Mess later wrote in his confidential report. Even more disturbing, the coordinates Thornberry spoke aloud proved to be correct when checked against the observatory's most precise calculations. This incident prompted the creation of a secret royal commission for linguistic anomalies in 1826, chaired by none other than Colonel Worthington, the same man who had led the original Inverare investigation. Over the next 15 years, the commission documented hundreds of cases, its research drifting toward a single terrifying possibility: that the boy from Inverare had somehow infected other minds with his language. Dr. Erasmus, who had examined the boy in 1821, became the commission's chief theorist. In 1828, he proposed what he called the theory of linguistic transmission. "We are not dealing with an isolated phenomenon," he wrote. "The language itself appears to possess the ability to replicate, planting itself like a seed in susceptible human minds, germinating under specific conditions." Patterns in the data seemed to support his theory. Most episodes occurred in individuals who had experienced altered states, high fever, scientific experiments, or intense spiritual visions. More disturbingly, many reported vivid dreams in the days before the event, dreams in which a strange child appeared, teaching them words they instinctively understood. Margaret Sinclair, wife of an Oxford professor, described in an 1829 letter, "For 3 nights, I dreamed of a boy unlike any other. He spoke to me in a strange tongue, and though I had never heard it before, I understood him completely. When I awoke, I found myself speaking it aloud. Then, in 1831, the commission made a discovery that changed everything. The boy from Inverare was still alive. The revelation came from James Morrison, a former soldier who claimed to have worked as a guard at a secret military facility in northern England. For 5 years, Morrison said, he had watched over an anomalous child kept in a cell lined with lead and iron, supposedly to contain some kind of influence, even through the thick walls. Morrison testified, I could hear him speaking that language, and whenever he did, strange things happened, equipment failing in impossible ways, guards suddenly babbling in unknown tongues, and at night, symbols appearing on the walls as if carved by invisible hands. When the commission investigated, they found the facility abandoned, but the lead-lined cells remained, their walls still covered in the same complex symbols from the boy's early records. Morrison claimed the site had been evacuated in 1830 after an incident so disturbing that the scientists decided it was safer to release the boy. From then on, the trail grew fragmented but no less unnerving. Between 1831 and 1850, sporadic sightings of the child surfaced across the British Isles. Strangely, he never appeared to age. In 1835, a Dublin merchant claimed to have seen him speaking with sailors in a language that made the glassware on nearby tables vibrate. In 1841, a Bristol physician treated an injured boy who spoke the impossible tongue, but the child vanished overnight, leaving strange carvings in his hospital room. The most thoroughly documented sighting came in 1847, during the Great Irish Famine. Father Michael O'Sullivan, tending to refugees in Liverpool, wrote to his bishop, a child appeared among the starving, yet he was clean, well-fed, and unlike any other. When I spoke to him, he replied in the language of the Inverare boy. O'Sullivan, a scholar of ancient languages, spent hours conversing with the child, and claimed to understand fragments of what he said, descriptions of places on no map, of people who live between moments, and of a great gathering yet to come. Even worse, the boy revealed intimate details about O'Sullivan's life memories, fears, and thoughts he had never voiced. It was as if he could read the entire history of my soul, O'Sullivan wrote. When he left, I felt marked, chosen for something I cannot comprehend. 3 years later, O'Sullivan was found dead in his cell. No signs of violence, no illness, just a face frozen in pure terror on the walls around him. Hundreds of symbols in the boy's impossible script. In 1851-30, years to the day after his first appearance in Inverare, the sightings abruptly ceased. But the phenomenon did not end. It changed. From the 1860s onward, reports no longer described sightings of the boy, but strange linguistic influences in the minds of some of history's greatest thinkers. Charles Darwin wrote privately to his cousin that he had begun dreaming in a language of numbers and patterns that gave him sudden insights into evolution. Gregor Mendel admitted in letters to colleagues that his groundbreaking work on heredity was inspired by dreams, in which a child taught him the grammar of life, in a language built of patterns and probabilities. The pattern was always the same. Scientists, standing at the very edge of human understanding, reported strange encounters with an impossible language, each time finding their breakthroughs accelerated in ways they could not explain. In 1876, the Royal Commission for Linguistic Anomalies was officially dissolved. But the closure was not the result of answers, it was an act of fear. In its final report, signed by Colonel Worthington shortly before his death, came a chilling conclusion. We have reached the inevitable determination that the subject known as the Boy of Inverare is not tanned, never was entirely human. His language is not merely a method of communication, but a form of technology capable of influencing and accelerating human cognition. Every mind touched by it becomes a carrier spreading patterns of thought that may be altering the very course of human evolution. For this reason, all files are to remain classified indefinitely. Humanity may not be ready to comprehend what it has encountered by the 20th century, as science advanced at an unprecedented pace. A few researchers began to notice unsettling patterns, signs that the boy's influence had never truly ended. Dr. Alina Kinos, a historian of science at Cambridge, devoted decades to studying the declassified files. In 1987, she published her findings discreetly, revealing a disturbing correlation. The locations of historical sightings of the boy often became major centers of scientific innovation within a generation. Even more troubling, Kinos discovered that many of the greatest minds of the 19th and 20th centuries described private dreams or visions involving a strange language that shaped their work. Nikola Tesla spoke of electric whispers in a language of numbers guiding his inventions. Albert Einstein wrote of moments when the equations of relativity appeared to him in the language of the cosmos, something beyond human words. Even James Watson and Francis Crick, co-discoverers of DNA's structure, hinted in private letters at insights that came from an inexplicable source. Kinos's conclusion was stark. The language of the Inverare boy may have been silently steering human progress for more than a century. The real question, she warned, was not whether he was still influencing USPA, just how much of our technological evolution had been shaped by a non-human intelligence. Today, in the 21st century, the case of the boy from Inverare remains one of Britain's most well-documented yet least understood mysteries. Theories about his origin vary wildly. Some believe he was a time traveler, bringing fragments of the future hidden within an alien grammar our minds can only half decipher. Others argue he was an extraterrestrial envoy, communicating through universal mathematics. The most unsettling theory put forth by a small group of linguists and theoretical physicists suggests the boy was a glimpse of our own future, an evolved human consciousness freed from the constraints of linear language. What is certain is this. In 1821, a child appeared in a remote Scottish village speaking a language that should not exist. His presence set off a chain reaction that may have quietly shaped the destiny of human civilization for over 2 centuries, and if the patterns identified by researchers are correct, his influence is not over. Even now, somewhere in the world, scientists and inventors may be hearing that same impossible tongue its whispers, accelerating our journey toward a future that was planned long before we understood it. The impossible language may be the invisible engine behind modern progress, and perhaps that was the plan all along. If this story of hidden influence and secret evolution has stirred something in you, subscribe for more journeys into humanity's forgotten archives, and tap the notification bell because the next mystery could arrive at any moment and change everything we thought we knew about ourselves.